There is a plant that produces more protein per acre than soybeans, more than chicken, more than any crop currently feeding humanity. It doubles its entire biomass every 48 hours. It grows without soil, without fertilizer, without pesticides. It contains nutrients that scientists swore were impossible to find in plants. Ancient Chinese physicians prescribed it to heal fevers and reduce inflammation. Buddhist monks consumed it as the purest form of sustenance on Earth. NASA engineers selected it as the primary protein source for future Mars colonies. Today, across suburban America, homeowners pay up to $800 per acre to spray chemicals that kill it on contact. The federal government classifies it as an aquatic nuisance. An entire $650 million industry exists solely to eradicate it from ponds, lakes, and waterways. This plant could revolutionize global food security. It could end protein deficiency in developing nations. It could feed astronauts on multi-year space missions. And the chemical industry has spent 6 decades making absolutely certain you never learned its name. This is the story of the most efficient food production system nature has ever created, and why they taught an entire civilization to fear it. ACT1. 2 worlds. 1 plant. 050 to 330. Picture 2 scenes happening simultaneously, separated by 8,000 miles but connected by a single organism. Scene 1. A manicured suburb outside Phoenix, Arizona. Late afternoon. A homeowner stands at the edge of his backyard pond, shaking his head in visible frustration. The water surface is covered in a thin film of green. Not algae exactly, something finer, something that looks almost like green dust scattered across the surface. He reaches for a spray bottle of aquatic herbicide. The label reads, "Dequit," in bold letters, with warning symbols covering half the bottle. Application cost: $600 for a half-acre pond. The instructions warn him not to touch the water for 72 hours after treatment, not to let pets drink from it, not to use it for irrigation. He sprays anyway. His homeowners association sent him a violation notice 3 days ago. The green film constitutes a visual nuisance under Section 4(7) of the Covenant. Continued violations may result in fines of $500 per week. He has no choice. The herbicide hits the water. Within hours, the green film will turn brown, die, and sink to the bottom. The pond will be clean again, clear, acceptable, dead. Now scene 2. A village in northeastern Thailand, the Isan region. Early morning. An elderly woman crouches beside a large ceramic pot filled with vibrant green water. The surface is completely covered with what looks like tiny green beads, each one smaller than a lentil, floating in dense clusters. She scoops handfuls of the green into a woven basket, carefully lifting it from the water. Her granddaughter, maybe 7 years old, helps rinse it 3 times under clean running water. They work with practiced efficiency, movements passed down through generations. The green goes into a stone mortar. They grind it into a paste with garlic, chili, and lime juice. It becomes the base for a soup they'll eat for breakfast. The whole family gathers around. The youngest children eat it mixed with rice. The grandmother eats it straight, like it's the most normal thing in the world. They call it Kai Nam. It translates literally as eggs of the water. Same organism. One culture sprays $600 worth of poison to destroy it. The other culture eats it for breakfast and thanks it for growing. That contradiction is not accidental. It's not a matter of different tastes or cultural preferences. It's the result of a systematic, deliberate campaign that lasted 6 decades and rewrote how an entire civilization perceives abundance. The fastest growing organism on Earth, the plant both people are looking at, is duckweed. More specifically, it's Wolfia globosa, the smallest flowering plant on Earth and the fastest growing protein source in nature. Under optimal conditions, which require nothing more than still water, sunlight, and basic dissolved nutrients, duckweed doesn't just grow quickly. It doubles its entire biomass every 29 to 48 hours. Let that sink in for a moment. Every single day, 1 plant becomes 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 8. The growth is exponential. It's relentless. It's biologically unstoppable. Start with a single microscopic speck in a bucket of water. Within 30 days, you'd have over 1 billion plants. By day 60, you'd have more individual plants than there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. The mathematics of exponential growth become almost incomprehensible. That growth rate terrifies the agricultural industry because it represents something they cannot control. You cannot patent a plant that reproduces itself every 48 hours without permission. You cannot sell fertilizer to something that grows in wastewater. You cannot create dependency when abundance is the default biological state. So they did the only thing they could do to protect a $200 billion global industry built on chemical dependence. They declared war on it. The vocabulary of fear. The war didn't start with herbicides. It started with language. They created an entire vocabulary specifically designed to make you see a threat instead of food. Listen to the terms: aquatic nuisance, invasive species, noxious weed, green plague, pond scum. Every single term is loaded with negative connotation. Not floating vegetable, not water plant, not protein crop. Those terms would make you curious. They would make you think food. Instead, nuisance, invasive, noxious, plague, scum. Terms that trigger disgust. Terms that justify chemical intervention. Terms that make poisoning abundance seem reasonable, even necessary. This linguistic reframing is not accidental. It's propaganda, pure and simple, and it works so completely that most people in Western countries don't even know duckweed is edible. The thought of eating something from a pond triggers immediate revulsion. That revulsion is learned. It's cultural conditioning. Children don't naturally find green water disgusting. They find it interesting, full of life, worth exploring. It's adults who teach them to see it as dirty, as something requiring elimination. And that teaching serves a very specific economic purpose. ACT 2. What they don't want you to know. 3:30 to 8 o'clock. Let's talk about what's actually inside this microscopic plant that's been classified as a nuisance. Because this is where the suppression becomes genuinely criminal. The protein revelation. Wolfia globosa contains 40 to 45% protein by dry weight. To put that in perspective, let's compare it to the protein sources humanity currently relies on. Soybeans, the gold standard of plant protein. The crop we've been told represents peak agricultural efficiency, contain approximately 36% protein. Chicken breast contains about 23% protein. Whole eggs contain roughly 13% protein. Beef, depending on the cut, ranges from 20 to 26% protein. Duckweed contains more protein by weight than any of them, but protein percentage alone doesn't tell the complete story. What matters for human nutrition is protein quality, specifically amino acid profile. The human body requires 9 essential amino acids that it cannot synthesize on its own. We must obtain them from food. Most plant proteins are incomplete. They lack one or more essential amino acids, which is why nutritionists tell vegetarians to combine different plant sources. Rice and beans together provide complete protein because rice contains amino acids beans lack, and vice versa. Hummus and pita bread work on the same principle. The combinations are necessary because individual plant sources are deficient. Wolfia globosa is different, completely different. The amino acid profile that shouldn't exist. In 2018, researchers at Ben Gurion University in Israel conducted a clinical trial comparing protein quality from 3 sources: soft cheese, green peas, and Wolfia globosa. They recruited 36 healthy men and fed them identical portions, 30 grams of protein from each source on separate test days. Then they drew blood samples every hour for 3 hours, measuring amino acid concentrations and tracking how the body absorbed and utilized each protein source. The results, published in the journal Clinical Nutrition, should have made international headlines. They should have changed food policy worldwide. Wolfia globosa outperformed the cheese. Blood concentrations of essential amino acids spiked higher with the duckweed than with the animal protein. The digestibility score hit 89%, placing it in the same category as eggs and milk. The plant contained all 9 essential amino acids in ratios that closely matched WHO recommendations for human requirements. You could eat Wolfia globosa as your sole protein source and meet all essential amino acid needs. No combining necessary, no supplementation required. That single fact should have made it a global staple crop immediately, but the revelations didn't stop there. The vitamin B12 impossibility. Now we arrive at something that should not be possible according to established nutritional science. Vitamin B12 is the argument, the fundamental, supposedly unassailable proof that plant-based diets require supplementation. Every vegan knows the drill. You must supplement B12 because it only exists in animal products. It's synthesized by bacteria in animal digestive systems, incorporated into animal tissues. And humans can only obtain it by eating animals or taking supplements derived from bacterial fermentation. That's the rule. That's what every nutrition textbook teaches. That's what the supplement industry, a multi-billion-dollar market, depends on. In 2020, researchers at Ben-Gurion University published something that violated the rule. They found bioactive vitamin B12 in Wolfia globosa, not inactive B12 analogs that show up in some algae but can't be used by the human body. Real, bioavailable, functional B12. They confirmed it using liquid chromatography mass spectrometry, the gold standard for B12 detection. The testing was rigorous. The results were peer-reviewed. The presence of B12 was undeniable. Approximately 2.5 micrograms per 100 grams of dried plant. That's significant. That's measurable. That's enough to meet daily requirements if you're eating reasonable quantities. The mechanism is fascinating. Inside Wolfia globosa tissues live bacterial endophytes, microorganisms that have formed a stable symbiotic relationship with the plant. These bacteria synthesize B12, and when you consume the plant, you receive that B12. Think about what this means. This single discovery demolishes one of the primary arguments against plant-based nutrition. It eliminates the supposed necessity of supplementation. It threatens a massive industry built on B12 deficiency. The complete nutritional package, but the nutritional profile goes even further. Wolfia globosa contains omega-3 fatty acids, specifically alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, at concentrations comparable to traditional sources like flaxseed. It's essentially fish oil that grows in a pond without killing fish. It contains iron, calcium, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium. It's dense with polyphenols and antioxidants at levels comparable to kale and spinach. It provides vitamins A, C, and multiple B-complex vitamins. It's not just protein. It's not just B12. It's a complete nutritional package in an organism smaller than a grain of sand. Let's review what we know so far. This plant contains 45% protein by dry weight, provides all 9 essential amino acids in optimal ratios, produces vitamin B12 through bacterial symbiosis, offers omega-3 fatty acids without fish, delivers comprehensive micronutrients, doubles its biomass every 48 hours, grows without soil, fertilizer, or pesticides, requires only water and sunlight. So here's the question nobody in the agricultural industry wants to answer. If this plant is so perfect, why isn't it feeding the world? Why isn't it in every grocery store? Why is it classified as a nuisance instead of recognized as a miracle crop? The answer reveals everything about who controls what you eat. ACT3. The systematic burial, 8 o'clock to 1300. To understand how duckweed was suppressed, we need to go back to 1909 and meet a German chemist named Fritz Haber. The chemical revolution. Haber had solved what seemed like an impossible problem. He developed a process to synthesize ammonia directly from atmospheric nitrogen and hydrogen. Before this, nitrogen fertilizer came from natural sources: manure, crop rotation, nitrogen-fixing plants like clover and beans. By 1913, Haber's colleague Karl Bosch had scaled the process to industrial production. The Haber-Bosch process could create unlimited quantities of nitrogen fertilizer from thin air and natural gas. This changed agriculture forever. Suddenly, you could grow the same crop year after year on the same land without rotation. You could farm marginal soils that would never naturally support crops. You could ignore traditional wisdom about letting land rest. Just dump synthetic nitrogen on depleted soil and crops would grow anyway. By 1950, synthetic fertilizer use had exploded globally. By 2000, humans were fixing more nitrogen artificially than all natural terrestrial ecosystems combined. The chemical fertilizer industry had become a $200 billion annual empire. And that empire had a problem. A tiny, microscopic, floating problem that threatened the entire business model. Why duckweed is a threat? Here's what makes Wolfia globosa such a threat to industrial agriculture. First, it doesn't need soil. It grows in water. That eliminates the need for arable land, which means farmers don't need to buy fertilizers to maintain soil fertility. Second, it doesn't need synthetic fertilizers. Duckweed absorbs nutrients directly from water. It thrives in agricultural runoff, in wastewater, in polluted ponds full of the nitrogen and phosphorus that industrial farming dumps into waterways. Studies have demonstrated that duckweed can remove 99% of nitrogen and 88% of phosphorus from contaminated water while simultaneously producing edible protein. It treats pollution and creates food in the same process. Third, and most importantly, it cannot be controlled through seed patents. Wolfia reproduces through simple cell division. You don't need to buy seeds from Monsanto every spring. You don't need patented genetics. You just need one microscopic plant and a bucket of water. For an industry built entirely on manufactured dependency, this is an existential threat. The suppression strategy. The suppression wasn't overt. Nobody passed laws banning duckweed cultivation. No government agency explicitly prohibited its use as food. The strategy was far more subtle and far more effective. They simply made sure that every piece of infrastructure, every research grant, every agricultural extension program, every farm subsidy pointed in one direction: chemically dependent monoculture. When farmers asked about alternative protein crops, extension agents recommended soybeans, which require fertilizer, pesticides, and annual seed purchases. When universities received agricultural research funding, it came with strings attached, often from corporations with vested interests in chemical agriculture. When the USDA developed dietary guidelines, the advisory panels included representatives from meat and dairy industries but nobody advocating for aquatic plants. The entire system was structured to make alternatives invisible. Duckweed didn't fit the industrial model. It never would. So it simply didn't get studied, didn't get promoted, didn't get incorporated into agricultural policy. Meanwhile, cultural conditioning did the rest. Western aesthetic standards demanded clear, mirror-like water. Green surface growth became associated with neglect, poor maintenance, even disease. Homeowners associations codified this perception into legally enforceable covenants. The result? An entire civilization learned to see food as a problem requiring chemical elimination. ACT4. The Space Age Validation, 1300 to 1630. But here's where the story takes an ironic turn that exposes just how cynical the suppression has been. NASA's discovery. In the 2010s, NASA engineers faced a fundamental problem with long-duration space missions. How do you feed astronauts on a 3-year journey to Mars when every kilogram of cargo costs thousands of dollars to launch? You need a crop that grows extremely fast, produces complete protein, requires minimal water, tolerates recycled wastewater, and can be cultivated in closed-loop life support systems where every resource must be recycled indefinitely. They tested dozens of candidates: lettuce, tomatoes, potatoes, various microalgae species, soybeans. Then they tested duckweed. The results were conclusive. Wolfia globosa outperformed every other candidate by orders of magnitude. NASA engineers calculated that a small vertical farm of duckweed could provide complete protein needs for a crew of 6 on a 3-year Mars mission. In 2021, the company Green Onyx sent duckweed samples to the International Space Station aboard SpaceX mission CRS-29. The goal? Test cultivation in microgravity conditions. Research published in Scientific Reports in 2024 confirmed that Wolfia globosa maintains protein production even under altered gravity. It works in space. It could literally feed future Mars colonies. The unbearable irony. Think about the absurdity of this situation. On Earth, we classify duckweed as an aquatic nuisance. We spend $650 million annually on herbicides to kill it. Homeowners associations fine residents who let it grow. Agricultural departments list it as a pest species requiring eradication. In space, it's recognized as the future of human survival, the most efficient food production system available, the crop that will feed humanity as we expand into the solar system. The same plant. The only difference is context and profit motive. On Earth, duckweed competes with established industries. It threatens fertilizer sales, seed patents, and chemical herbicides. Allowing it to become recognized as food would cost corporations billions in lost revenue. In space, there are no established industries to protect. There are no profit margins to defend. There's only survival. And when survival is the priority, the truth becomes obvious. Wolfia globosa is not a weed. It's the most efficient food production system nature has ever created. The irony is almost unbearable. We poison on Earth what we plan to eat on Mars. ACT5. The historical reality, 1630 to 1900. The suppression becomes even more outrageous when you realize this isn't a new discovery. This isn't cutting-edge science revealing something previously unknown. Ancient knowledge. In 300 BCE, the Greek botanist Theophrastus documented duckweed in his botanical surveys. He called it lemna and classified it as a distinct aquatic plant worthy of scientific study. Not trash, not refuse, a recognized food source. Ancient Chinese medical texts from the Han Dynasty, dating back over 2,000 years, recorded prescriptions using duckweed to reduce fevers and treat inflammation. Physicians specifically chose it because it grew in water, believing it carried cooling properties that could balance excessive internal heat. In ancient India, Buddhist monks practicing asceticism consumed duckweed as a symbol of spiritual purity. They weren't eating it because they were desperate or ignorant. They were choosing it deliberately as the simplest, most abundant form of sustenance nature could provide. Eating it meant accepting the most basic life force without taking from cultivated fields or killing animals. These weren't primitive people eating garbage. These were advanced civilizations with sophisticated agriculture, extensive botanical knowledge, and detailed medical traditions. They chose duckweed deliberately. They studied it. They valued it. They passed knowledge of its use through generations. In Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar, people have been eating kai nam for centuries. It's unremarkable. It's normal. It's food. Markets sell it alongside vegetables. Families grow it in clay pots outside their homes. Grandmothers teach children how to harvest and prepare it. The knowledge never disappeared in Asia. It was maintained through continuous cultural transmission. But in the West, it was systematically erased. The breaking point. By the 1960s, the suppression was complete in Western countries. Duckweed had been successfully rebranded as pond scum in the public consciousness. Something that covered stagnant water. Something you would never eat. Something requiring chemical elimination. NASA briefly experimented with lemna species in the 1960s but abandoned the research because those particular species produce oxalic acid, which can contribute to kidney stones in high quantities. The public narrative became, NASA tried duckweed and it didn't work. Nobody mentioned that Wolfia species don't produce oxalic acid. Nobody mentioned that NASA had simply tested the wrong genus. The failed experiment became justification for dismissing all duckweed permanently. Decades passed. The knowledge faded. Western culture completely forgot that duckweed was edible, let alone that it was one of the most nutritious foods on Earth. Until recently. Something is changing. The carefully maintained wall of ignorance is starting to crack. The modern research. In 2018, an Israeli company called Hinoman began cultivating a strain of Wolfia globosa they branded as Mankai. They published rigorous, peer-reviewed research in respected journals demonstrating the protein content, amino acid profile, and B12 presence. They ran clinical trials proving digestibility and bioavailability. They obtained novel food approval from the European Food Safety Authority in 2021. They started selling frozen cubes and protein powder derived from duckweed. The scientific validation is now undeniable. Major research institutions worldwide are investigating duckweed for applications in food security, water treatment, and climate mitigation. But the real shift is happening at the grassroots level. Individuals are learning to identify duckweed, culture it in buckets on balconies, and incorporate it into their diets. They're rediscovering what ancient cultures never forgot. What the future could look like. Imagine a world where protein production is truly decentralized, where families grow their daily protein requirements in a few square meters of shallow tanks, where apartment buildings maintain rooftop duckweed farms that provide supplemental nutrition for residents, where small-scale farmers maintain duckweed ponds that supply local markets with fresh, complete protein year-round, where wastewater treatment facilities grow duckweed to clean effluent while producing food, closing the nutrient cycle instead of allowing pollution, where developing nations use duckweed to address malnutrition without dependence on imported soy or foreign aid, where protein becomes abundant, accessible, and free from corporate control. This isn't fantasy. This is what duckweed makes possible. This is what it has always made possible. The technology is simple. The biology is proven. The nutritional science is solid. The only barrier is knowledge and cultural acceptance. How to start? You can begin today. Wolfia globosa cultures are available from aquarium suppliers and specialty online retailers. You can grow it in any clean container with dechlorinated water. Start small. A bucket on a balcony. Harvest by skimming. Rinse thoroughly. Eat fresh in salads. Blend into smoothies. Cook into soups. Or dry into powder. The taste is mild, slightly grassy, easy to incorporate. The nutrition is undeniable. The cost is nearly zero. The growth is exponential. But more important than growing it yourself is changing how you see it. Stop accepting the narrative that green water is dirty. Start seeing it as unharvested abundance. Stop trusting agricultural departments that classify survival foods as nuisances. Start asking who benefits from that classification. Stop buying herbicides to kill food. Start recognizing that the chemical industry has been lying to you for 6 decades to protect profit margins. Conclusion. The truth they couldn't kill. 2200 to 2330. They called it pond scum to make you disgusted. They classified it as a nuisance to justify the chemicals. They created a $650 million market by teaching you to fear the most efficient protein source on Earth. They removed it from agricultural research. They excluded it from dietary guidelines. They trained extension agents to recommend soybeans instead. They structured farm subsidies to favor chemical monoculture. They wrote covenants that legally require its elimination. They spent 6 decades burying knowledge that was thousands of years old. But knowledge doesn't die. It just hides. It waits for conditions that allow it to resurface. Ancient Chinese physicians knew. Buddhist monks knew. Thai grandmothers knew. NASA engineers know. And now you know. This plant has fed civilizations. This plant cleans polluted water. This plant produces more protein per acre than anything we currently farm. This plant doubles its biomass every 48 hours without asking for permission, without requiring fertilizer, without needing soil. And that's precisely why they wanted you to forget it existed. But you won't forget, because now you see the green water for what it really is. Not a plague, not a nuisance, not pond scum. Food, the fastest growing, most efficient, most complete food on Earth. And they've been teaching you to poison it your entire life. If this opened your eyes, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Every like, every share helps spread the knowledge they tried to suppress. Drop a comment telling us what other weeds you want us to investigate. The next discovery is coming, and it's going to make you question everything else they taught you about food.